We're live.
All right, welcome everybody to House Energy and Digital Infrastructure. We are continuing to take testimony on the FY27 budget so that we can write our letter of recommendation to House of Reps, which is due a week from Friday. So we have taken some introductory testimony on the ADS budget and changes to that in the way it's being presented this year. And we want to make sure that we understand that. So we have invited the Commissioner of the Department of Finance and Management to join us today to shed additional light. So Commissioner, we'll go around and introduce ourselves. We always ask everybody in the room to introduce ourselves because I like to know who's on the benches, and then we'll turn it over to you. So I'm Representative Kathleen James from Manchester.
Scott Campbell from St. John's Barry.
Chris Morrow, Wyndham, Windsor, Bennington.
Michael Southwest Caledonia too.
Christopher Howland, Rutherford Ford.
Yeah, Tori, Washington too.
Recognize you.
Laura Billy, Wyndham too.
Great. And
Lisa Goggin, IT consultant with Jan.
Oh, hey. John Kelly, ADS Chief Staff.
great.
Dana May Perry from the Craftsman Group.
Super. For the record,
Adam Gresham, Commissioner of Finance and Management. And Madam Chair, thank you for the introduction. Actually, this is a new committee for me.
it's a new committee for us.
Fair enough. Thanks for the opportunity to come in and speak to you. So I thought I would, there's 4 slides here. They're pretty high level, but I think they get at what from the budget office we're trying to achieve. And let me start off by saying that in prior testimony and conversations you've had on this budget and this structure, one of the questions, I think actually it was Representative Celia who asked, one of the questions was what problem are we trying to solve here? You know, why are we doing this? Which is fair. So why? There's 2 issues we're addressing with this. And the first is, as I think the Secretary probably told you she was here before. She had come to me, gosh, probably over a year ago now, I would say, between a year and 2 years ago, and said, I want to budget for how I operate. In other words, the way we budget for ADS services is not really in line with how we're operating the agency. Can we change this? And that's what led to long discussions on the creation of what you have seen already, the core enterprise services. Her thought was that that was really kind of how they're operating. They have this core enterprise services they're offering every agency and department in state government, yet their budget doesn't really reflect that. So she wanted to restructure how they budget. And so we work with them. Part of my job is to work with secretaries and commissioners to make sure that they're budgeting the way their budgets reflect how they operate. So that was really the first thing. The second thing is kind of the other component of my job. And as many of you may know, finance and management is really 2 departments. My kind of the more visible part of my job is presenting the governor's budget after he presents it himself and advocating for it and defending it. And of course, more importantly, helping to develop it. The less visible part of my job, but I would argue the larger component of my job, is to implement the budget once it's passed. When you guys pass the budget, you agree with the Senate, the bill passes, the governor signs it, and it becomes law. It's the job of finance and management, but the what we call FinOps, financial operations, to put it into practice on July 1. And so we spend an awful lot of time doing that and making sure that every penny, and by penny, I mean every single penny that is appropriated gets to where it's supposed to be and not more than that. So that's our job of implementing and overseeing and controlling the budget. Part of that is we come out with what we call the ACFR, the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, every year. By law, it has to be issued by December 31st. We typically issue it the last week of December. And in that ACFR, among other sections, it's a long document, we review internal service funds. All the internal service funds we have. And by nature, internal service funds should be in balance, roughly on either side of zero. Some internal service funds are in deficit, and the CIT fund went from 3 years ago. It had a just under $1 million positive balance. The next year, it had about a $5 million negative balance. The following year, it had a $13 million negative balance, and in the most recently printed annual comprehensive financial report for the fiscal year 25, it had a $25 million negative balance.
Sorry, let's
So-
clarify.
Yes, sir.
Sorry,
No, no,
CIP. It's not appearing in my memory banks here. CIT fund.
Computer information technology.
I think we need a one oh, I
That's
think we need
the,
to
that
drop
is the
that.
internal service fund that ADS uses to perform its functions.
So that's,
And I'll actually get
Yes.
into that.
okay.
I'll
You're gonna
get
tell
into
us about
that.
the mechanics of
Next
that fund.
slide.
Okay.
Okay,
So when an internal service fund runs a deficit, it's our job not only to point it out, but to figure out a way to prevent that from deteriorating and in the long term, make it go away. So when you have an internal service fund in a deficit position, and you have the secretary of the Agency of Digital Services asking you to revise how they budget and create new structure for budgeting, that's the why. That's why I'm here today, and that's why you see some differences in what you've seen in past years. So to Representative Sevilla's question, what is the CIT fund? The short answer is pool of spending authority. And an internal service fund, or a department that is funded through an internal service fund, includes ADS, but it includes other departments too, like BGS, those general services, DHR, Department of Human Resources. And kind of the short explanation is a lot of state government, think Department of Public Safety or Agency of Human Services, they perform functions for Vermonters. Another part of state government performs functions for those departments that are performing functions for Vermonters. They essentially allow them to do business. They give them a office or a building where they can hang their hat. They provide, in the case of ADS, a network where we can connect and carry out the stuff we do. They provide the software we need and the like. DHR, across the street, they provide services for our employees. So they're internal. So they're not really serving Vermonters. They're serving the agencies and departments that are servicing Vermonters. They're an internal kind of behind the scenes operator. And because of that, we don't give them direct appropriations. They do not get direct general fund appropriations. They get their spending authority from other agencies and departments that they serve, which is the nature of an internal service fund. And that is how ADS gets its spending authority. They get it through 4 different methodologies, but all of those are put into what becomes the CIT pool. So there are 4 components of that pool today. The first is the allocation, and as originally conceived, the allocation, and by allocation, the reason they're called an allocation, because we allocate that out, all those costs out to the agencies and departments. That's kind of call it their overhead. The stuff that they provide statewide, like network availability, like maintaining equipment, like cybersecurity, reliability in network. It used to be they also maintain a lot of our servers and mainframes. Today, most of our servers have migrated to the cloud, but we still have a couple of different departments. So those costs, because they're for everyone, we allocate those out in the budgets. Each department has a line item for ADS, internal service. That in prior years, actually for fiscal 26 amounted to about 13 million, a little more than $13 million. And again, we allocated that out according to a user account, according to a formula based on users.
Sorry, 13 million is total.
That was,
I don't want to throw you
that was
off.
the total allocation in
Amongst
this year's
all.
budget. That was amongst all. the other three components that all feed into this pool are based on demand. And the concept there is they're not used by everyone. They're used by specific departments and agencies for specific functions. So instead of socializing the cost of a system that only serves the Department of Public Safety, we'll charge the Department of Public Safety for that, and they'll pay us back. So there's three different ways they do that. The first, the SLA, which stands for Service Level Agreement, which is, I've never, for the life of me, figured out how they actually got that terminology. But when you think SLA, think kind of digits, think machines, think mainframes, think data storage. That's what it is. And different departments have different levels of these services. Some departments, for example, with data storage are very heavy. Think again, DPS with the body cams, and they have a requirement. They have to store all this video for X number of years. That's kind of expensive. But my department, finance and management, shouldn't pay for that, right? I mean, that's a service that they provide. So that's billed directly to them. Now I have to store vision information. That's our statewide accounting system. So if one of you guys comes to me and says, in 2005, what did we spend on public safety? I can go back in our system and I can tell you, that's stored. So, data, there are some departments that still have mainframes. Can't remember which one. I believe Human Services still has mainframe. I think AOT may also, but they're not statewide. So that's the SLA is built based on need for basically technology equipment. When you think of timesheet, which is the next thing, think human beings. And these are the guys and women who were prior to ADS, ADS, they were embedded in departments. So, public safety had a crew of IT people who maintained what they needed to maintain, who were the go-to people when you had a problem, who helped set up your software and the like. They're embedded in departments. Well, they still are, except that they're drawing their paychecks now from ADS, not from, say, public safety or human services. And ADS, in turn, bills public safety or human services, timesheet billing monthly. So the final one, and there's been a lot of discussion, I know, in this committee, is what's called bespoke, another kind of funky term. But when you think of bespoke, think of IT projects. Across the state, they're different in different departments. In human services, you have the Medicaid data warehouse or the integrated eligibility. In, BEAD-all, you have unemployment insurance modernization. AOT, you have the DMV modernization. So different projects statewide. And ADS would help to get the contract for those projects. They'd oversee it and so on. They would pay the vendor and then they would bill back the agency. So that's how they would recover their cost. So all four of these different kind of components of spending authority were pooled in the CIT fund. And that's what, at the end of the day, when ADS looks at their budget, they see $133 million in the CIT fund. That's their budget. That's their amount of spending authority. That's how it works now. And how it'll work, in fiscal 27 won't be dramatically different from that, but there'll be some changes. And part of that is really call it control nature of how we're working finance and management. We're trying to, break down what is a large pool of money into smaller components so it's easier to track. And don't think there's anything nefarious in this going on. It's more allowing us and ADS to see kind of how this money is flowing back and forth. Because, if you look at the pool, all of that water mixed together, if it were to turn a weird color, you want to isolate the source of that. You want to figure out, all right, so where is that coming from? And it's hard to tell in a big pool where it's coming from. So what we're trying to do is isolate these cost recovery methods, allocation, service level agreement, timesheet, bespoke into individual components. So we can, have a better feel for, what's going in, what's going out, and why there's a deficit situation.
Rep. Sylvia?
So, my progression, so what turns the pool funny colors? Like, what are the things that happen that we don't know why they happen?
So,
Or maybe a better question is, how does money get in and out of the pool?
so money gets into the pool when
Like the
a
actual.
budget is passed
Yeah.
and they get spending authority in these different components and allocation.
Yeah.
We allocate that out statewide. For SLA, they charge each department for services they use. For timesheet, they charge each department for embedded employees at Bespoke when they launch a project. So all of that money, when we pass a budget that you guys are contributing to, it says for ADS, there will be this amount for allocation, this amount for SLA, and so on. All of that goes into this pool here.
Right after we pass the budget, the
That's
money
correct.
goes right into the pool.
Yeah, spending authority does. Yeah.
That was the question I had. I don't think the money doesn't go into the pool, the ability to charge that much.
The spending.
Right, so it's
authority
not
goes
like-
into the-
It's not like we're dumping a bunch of money into a bucket. We're saying, I know this is the wrong way to say it, but here's your credit card and you have a $20,000 spending limit.
With ADS or with AHS.
We're saying to ADS, here is your total spending limit. We call it spending authority. And the components of it are, the allocations of what we're allocating out. The service level agreement, the SLA, the timesheet, the Bespoke, there, all these different amounts, we're piling them all together. We're putting them in this pool.
And you can't charge more than that. You can't you can't charge the agencies more than X, more than Y, right? There's a cap.
Yeah, there's a cap on their total spending authority.
So, but all of the money so ADS has spending authority, and then when they spend, they have to recover those funds.
That's correct.
And they go to the agency, present a bill,
Mhm.
and the agency then pays them.
That's correct.
And they only can charge as much as their spending authority.
That's right. They have X amount of spending authority for that.
And are all of the agencies and departments paying them according to the spending authority?
They're paying their bills. Yes.
Are they all paying them according to the spending authority?
Well, they're paying them according to what each bill says. In other words, for my department, we pay a monthly timesheet, which is roughly around $600-700 a month.
Yeah.
So yeah, when we get the bill, we pay.
So,
Okay.
this is related. So when you say the fund is in deficit, then that's the part I don't get. Is
So
ADS billing out? Do you mean that ADS is billing out more than its spending authority, or that agencies aren't paying? How does a fund like that get into deficit?
So there's a couple of, and I say theories because we're researching this now, and that's one reason why the budget is going to change in the future year, how we budget for these things. But keep in mind, as I said earlier, ADS as an internal service fund, it operates based on what's called the cost recovery model. They don't get a direct general fund appropriation. They get all their funding from different agencies and departments for various functions. So at the end of the year, they should be in a totally balanced position. They performed at these services and they billed for it. What's happening is they are not recovering all their costs for the services they're performing.
How come?
Well, yeah, why not?
So again, we're still speculating, but we're reasonably certain that there are a couple of things that are leading to it. Some of what they do is not recoverable. They're calling non-recoverable. Now, what does that mean? Remember when I said allocation is billed statewide, every department has a line item in their budget for their ADS allocation. That's what everyone pays for because those are services that everyone uses. Some services that ADS is performing are not billable statewide because they're not necessarily recoverable. So, for example, they're doing some work in artificial intelligence. When they're billing what they're performing statewide, they're billing out to agencies. The agencies have in their budgets amounts to pay for that. But in particular, think about this. The Agency of Human Services receives, I don't know what percentage, probably about between a third to 40% of their budget is federal money. By far the largest single program they run is Medicaid. Medicaid has a lot of strings attached. They'll pay for this, they will pay for that. So when the Agency of Human Services receives a bill or as part of their allocation, it includes artificial intelligence, data governance and management, project management. Medicaid's not necessarily going to pay for that. And so what the Agency of Human Services is saying is we can't bill our federal partners for that. We're just going to have to either not pay for it or pay for it with general funding. And so some of these services that are currently being performed by ADS, they're not billing out. They're not part of their allocation. Not to say they're bad services. That's not my point, but they can't bill them out as they should. So they're performing them, but they're not recovering those costs. That's the first thing. The second thing, which I think received more conversation, was within timesheet. There's a question about, whether their timesheet billing amounts are enough to recoup the cost of the humans. Remember, I think humans who make a timesheet, whether their hourly billing amounts are enough to cover their costs. There's been some debate about whether those hourly rates are too low to cover the costs or not. And so that's one, or a second possibility.
Rep Campbell.
Okay, so that's interesting. But I wanted to go back to the pool and these various items that are in the pool. I would imagine that each item and items under each of these items would have a budget line.
That's right.
So I guess I'm wondering how that is not a way to keep those budgets and those expenditures accountable.
So the budget line is their total spending authority. It doesn't, it doesn't really say how they're going to recover the costs. There's the thought that if they have, say, $30 million of timesheet spending authority, that they'll have $30 million of expenditures and recover $30 million of bills. But
I'm asking an allocation, let's say they have every agency and department in state government. And this is how they come up with a number for the allocation part of the CIT fund. For every agency and department, do they not have a number associated to that agency department for how much they expect to spend with that agency or department?
They do.
They do.
Each agency and department has a line item in their budget, or several line items, really. I mean,
Right.
timesheet and SLA,
Exactly.
the allocation, all of that is part of each agency and department's budget.
So I guess what I'm missing is, how is that not, if that's how it's structured, which is how it's got to be structured, how are we not holding agencies and departments accountable for that spending?
Well, we are. In other words, when they receive a bill, they pay. And there's very little history for departments and agencies not paying their bills. But
Right.
my point is that some of the functions, and the first point I made, some of the functions that are being carried out by ADS are not sent out as part of a bill. And they're not paid for through the allocation methodology. So those are costs that are not being recovered, and they're adding to a deficit in there in terms of this money.
Yeah, no, I'm following you there. I guess I'm just, and you haven't gotten to what the new system will be, but I'm trying to understand why the whole system is broken.
Well,
because if we have a line item for each agency department for each of these items in the CIT fund, then we do have a way of tracking not only what they're actually spending, but also what we're budgeting for them to spend.
it's hard to track when you have a big pool of money. From a control standpoint,
Mhm.
this pool is all of these sources are pulled together.
Yeah.
So it makes it very challenging to track what spending is going on where and what's leading to, it's more than speculation. We're reasonably certain we know, and ADS, we work with ADS, enough to know that there are certain functions that they're performing that they're not recovering. We know that.
Right.
And we're less certain with timesheet about the amount that should be billed, because there are a number of questions that we have and they have in that regard, and we're currently discussing it. But when you have, kind of control 101 is it's very hard to have a large pool of money to figure out what's going in and what's going out. So what we're trying to do is compartmentalize that, and then we can look, in, much more detail.
Well, maybe I'll wait until you get to what the new system is and then compare and contrast. Thank you.
So last year, we heard a lot about billing and the billing cycles, where ADS was billing for services that were done, but they wouldn't be able to bill until after I think it was fiscal year. I'm trying to remember the exact stuff that we took testimony on. And we ended up providing, I believe it was 15 million to ADS to get away from that process. Has that worked, or is that still contributing to the deficit?
So let's, and I will answer that. The answer is yes, it was a good idea. We needed to do that. And for a reason that has to do with the creation of what's called the core enterprise services. One of the contributing factors in the creation of core enterprise services for Secretary Riley Hughes was that the allocation amount, which was supposed to be kind of the cost of overhead and the services that everyone was receiving, really didn't reflect the true cost of delivering the services that everyone was receiving. It was too small. So some of what was the cost of, say, providing a network and maintaining the mainframes and servers and even making sure data was safe, some of that is included in the allocation, but some of it wasn't. For example, artificial intelligence or data governance or some project management, domain services and stuff like that. So the core enterprise services is going to include all of that, meaning it's going to, the allocation, the amount we allocate out to departments is going to grow. But part of the challenge there was we bill service level SLA in arrears. But so, for example, the SLA that departments pay this year in fiscal 26 were for services they received last year in fiscal 25. And, the reason for that was, I guess, reasonably straightforward. You don't know how much service you're going to use until the end of the year. You tally it up and then you bill. Well, part of this new model will incorporate some of the SLA services into the core enterprise services that's going to be allocated out to departments. So in fiscal 27, departments are going to be paying last year's SLA bill. And partly some of those services are going to be incorporated in this year's core enterprise services bill. It could be a double bill. And so that $15 million was meant to offset the pain of kind of charging departments twice, once for last year's services and once for this year's services. That was what the intent of that $15 million was. And it has worked. So by that, I mean, it's helped offset the double billing issue, and it's helped offset the pain that departments otherwise would have to come up with last year's bill, plus part of this year's bill. So yes, it was a good idea.
And we're still feeling effects of that in this deficit that we're talking about now, or no?
No, that was unrelated to the deficit.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So in this year's rendition, a few things have changed. That big pool of CIT money, I wanted to show a smaller pool, and I couldn't find anywhere
So
And I was something that was a kind of an above ground pool.
It's a bath.
So this is more like a hot tub. That's really not fair. It's, core enterprise services is larger than a hot tub, but smaller than an in-ground pool. So anyway, what we did was we broke up that large $133 million pool into smaller components, which will make it much, I think, more transparent and clear where the money is coming from and where it's going. The CIT fund, which was what we spoke about before, will be $35.7 million. That means we're going to bill that out to departments and agencies. They're billed by a formula based on user accounts. That's still going to be billed out as it was in past years. But what's new this year, and this gets to the fact that we had some unrecoverable expenses that were leading to a deficit in internal service fund. What's new this year is we're going to give them a $9 million direct appropriation. That's it. And that essentially acknowledges the fact that some of the services they're performing may be necessary services, but we can't allocate them out to every department because some departments have funding sources that won't pay them for that. So we're giving them straight general fund. And that would include predominantly data governance and management, which will be a large part of that, artificial intelligence, some project management costs, some domain services like Vermont.gov and like, but services that, the ADS believes are necessary to deliver a product of statewide digital services, but not readily allocable to agencies and departments statewide. So we're just giving them a direct general fund component. And that will not only, I think, make it easier for agencies and departments, they won't have to, figure out whether they can actually bill their partners if part of their funding source is federal. But it also, I think, make it easier for the agency of digital services to know that these functions will be directly paid for with general fund. So that's a change. Internal service funds don't get direct appropriations. Here we're acknowledging that some of their functions are really not easily recovered from billing out to agencies and departments. So we're going to give them a direct appropriation, which will be about 10% of their total appropriation, about $9 million. That's different. That $9 million and the $35.7 million will combine to roughly the $46 million of core enterprise services. If anyone comes to ask you, what's it cost to run a statewide IT program? That's a pretty good answer. That's what it costs. Now, there are other things, but like the SLA and timesheet and bespoke, which are down below, but the cost of just statewide IT, maintaining all the stuff that we need to maintain a 21st century presence in state government, that's going to be included in core enterprise services, $45 million. What you see below, sorry.
Okay. So I guess I'm trying to understand what makes up the $35 million now. I guess it's what we used to call allocation and timesheet, more or less. Is that?
So I brought, and these are really ADS questions, but I brought along a cheat sheet. Just so you know, I'm no IT expert. But what will make up the CIT fund and the that we will allocate out will be stuff like service desk support, enterprise product support, foundational security, enterprise architecture, finance and admin, for example, the people who came in to present to you before, the secretary, the business office, and so on. The enterprise project management, that will predominantly be general fund. Penetration testing, vulnerability assessment, internet and other network connectivity. So, these, I think that in their presentation, they cover for you, but that will be, I would argue, the cost of doing a statewide IT business, kind of core.
Well, it's kind of related to the FY26 system, the previous system, which you went into in some detail. We gave us a number for allocation, $13 million, but you didn't detail the SLA timesheet is named bespoke, but I guess I'm trying to relate the two.
So the allocation.
35 million, no, it still seems like a pretty big number for a pool.
It is. And like I said, if I had something better than a hot tub, I would have put it up there. But it is. And, part of what we're saying, either explicitly or implicitly is the allocation amount, the amount that we allocated out that was supposed to be, back in the day for running a statewide IT program was just too small. It wasn't enough to do the services that ADS believed they needed to do. So it covered many of these, though not all of these. Some of these that I just mentioned were not recovered, which led to deficit. They weren't billing out to agencies and departments. So that was leading to a deficit. So essentially what we're doing is we're saying, look, these services are happening. We can't will them away. They need to happen. So let's cover them and let's pony up for it. That's essentially why the core enterprise services, the CIT fund allocation has grown. I mean, it's about triple the size.
Yeah.
Not quite 2.5 cents times.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Commissioner Christian, so I'm struggling with all of this, although it's getting a little clearer. Thank you. The slide prior to this one. It would be helpful to have, so what I want to do is compare this slide to the subsequent slide in terms of dollar amounts.
Mhm.
Do we have the dollar amounts for the allocation SLA timesheet bespoke? Is that something that we could detail breakout like it is? And I don't know if it's apple to apple with the second slide because it's not labeled allocation SLA timesheet.
Well, they changed the names. So I'm going with the names the new names, but yes, I can have them for you.
It would just, for us mere mortals here, it would be really helpful if we could get a little bit closer to an apples to apples. That might speed up our comprehension.
I can do that.
What's happening here?
The other change on the third slide that's up there now is that the professional resourcing, that's the old timesheet. And, again, think humans. The enterprise offerings, that was formerly SLA. That amount has shrunk substantially. That was $25-30 million. It is now $11.7 million. And part of the reason is, again, some of these services that were formerly billed out based on demand, the Agency of Digital Services believe they're not really based on demand. They're being provided to everyone. So let's just be part of the core, the cost of doing business. Probably the best example of that is the Microsoft suite of products we have on our, everyone in state government has that suite. It's, in fact, some people in state government have a smaller suite. Think cloud drivers or I don't know, maintenance people. They have access to Microsoft products, but they're not what I would call kind of desktop users. So actually in our billing amounts within core, we've accounted for that. So AOT will receive a certain percentage less because they have some employees. DOC corrections is another good example of that. Some of the correctional officers may or may not be intensive users of Microsoft products. So in our allocation formula, we account for that. But that's formally the enterprise offering fund is formerly SLA, and that used to be much larger because that included billings for many, not all, but many software products that are used statewide. Microsoft's the best example. Now, we will still bill out if I have, for example, in my office, we have some software products that help us actually produce the annual budget and the annual comprehensive financial report. All agencies and departments shouldn't pay for that. That should be my expense. So that will still come through the enterprise operating fund, the SLA. We'll still get a bill for that at the end of the year, but it won't be for everyone.
So again, trying to make this comparison, if I'm just looking at totals, it looks like the total from 26 to 27 is about 45 million less.
That's right.
Say that again.
45 million or less.
Get into that.
So I just can't wait, you know?
Get into that.
So can I just clarify? Because I think I understand, but I want to make sure that I'm clear on it. So the Enterprise Services Fund is like SLA, but different in that it's not base services that everybody uses. It's base services that most departments use. Is that right?
It's base services that individual department. Here's a good example. Like I said, I'm not sure exactly where all the mainframes are, but there are 3 or 4 throughout state government. Human Services, I know, has a mainframe. So they're charged for the maintenance of that.
Right.
But I'm not charged for that in my department because we don't have them. So it would be that type of thing. If I have a specific software product that I use intensively, but no one else uses because their work doesn't require it, I'm charged for that. So substantially, I think the largest single part of the enterprise offerings fund will be for data storage, cloud services, data that we store in the cloud. That will, I think, make up the largest single component. That would again be a good question to ask the ADS, but I think that's the single largest component. It's different departments have different storage needs, and those are build out per. They're easy to measure, they're easy to charge for. So that's predominantly what SLA or now.
I think you said that was the core enterprise services. I think you said that was the core. Sorry to interrupt, but I think you said that was in core enterprise services. But
No,
it sounds like no, it's not. It's not. It's an enterprise offerings.
so core enterprise service data. I may have said data governance and management. That's not data storage. That's different.
Okay.
So the 1-to-1 is from the SLA in 2026 to the enterprise offerings in 2027.
Yeah, that number has changed substantially.
But what they're for is
Yeah.
the same.
Same thing. Yeah. Okay. Good. And then the final, and keep in mind, each of these now is going to have its own fund. So we'll be able to track what we spend, the spending authority and the recovery amounts by fund. And that's much easier than it is now because these will be isolated and we'll be able to see, well, you know, if we're kind of running a deficit in the professional resourcing fund, which used to be timesheet, we'll know it and we'll see it and we'll know, well, that's part of the problem. And we'll be able to kind of focus on it and see why. So this is, you know, again, much easier to look at and track. The final component here to your question earlier, Representative Scalia, customized services fund, that's the old bespoke. And bespoke last year in FY26 was $47.5 million. This year in the ADS budget, it is $5 million.
What was it last term? Sorry, Miss. 40.
I think it was 47.5. This year, it's quite a bit less. And that does not mean that there are no projects out there this year. This year, the spending authority that ADS will have will be $5 million. And that will substantially be for hardware and software and the like. That's part of bespoke. So in my department, if my laptop blows up and I need a new laptop, ADS, we contact ADS, we fill out a form, what kind of laptop we need, they go out and buy it, they give it to us, and they send us a bill. That will still happen. But for many, in fact, most of the projects that ADS had spending authority for, it was also spending authority in the various agencies and departments that were sponsoring those projects. That spending authority will rest solely with the departments and agencies that have those projects.
Okay, question. Okay, so I think I just heard you say there was dual spending authority
That's
for
right.
those projects, like 50 million and 50 million, like equal spending authority.
That's correct.
That's how it was.
Yes, that is how it is, how it was.
Was.
How it will be this year is the spending authority will rest with the agency or department that has the project.
So I do have questions about that, so I'm going to dive in now. So I know it's not going to be how it is, but how did it work when there was dual spending authority? Because it sounds to me like we've heard, and we're talking to ADS, and now I'm talking to you. We had heard ADS say that, that you guys thought they had excess spending authority, and now I'm hearing dual spending authority. So I'm trying to understand how it used to work, and it sounds like you thought that it wasn't working. So that's what I'm trying to get at. And also to kind of segue from there into like, I'm hearing you talk about financial control, financial oversight. So I'm wondering if we're fixing some sort of standard, that wasn't being adhered to, no one suggesting anything nefarious. It just sounds like to me that these moves are based on some spending authority that you didn't agree with, or that wasn't working, or maybe a desire for financial oversight and control that you thought wasn't working. So that I'm trying to get into all that.
Right. Yeah. So the difference between the bespoke spending authority and the spending authority from allocation now for enterprise services, SLA, and timesheet. The difference there is with bespoke, the likelihood of all that spending authority being needed is practically zero. Think about an IT project, a $20 million IT project. Are they going to use all $20 million of that the year they get it? In the perfect world, yeah, they start the project to be finished in a year, done. But in the real world, that doesn't happen. So by nature of IT projects, you inevitably will have excess spending authority in any one year. Eventually that money will be spent, but it won't necessarily be spent in the same year. So there's a difference between that and the SLA or the timesheet or the allocated spending authority. That was predominantly, if not entirely, being used. So bespoke was different in that regard already, in that, yes, it had excess spending authority, but that was not nefarious. That was just the nature of how projects work. So yeah, there was excess spending authority. So one of our concepts was, remember that big pool? We thought we've got to reduce the size of that pool and see what's in there and make it more transparent. So that's one way to do it, by reducing spending authority in one particular category that was kind of distinct from the others to begin with, and leaving it with the agency or department that was sponsoring the project, so the project could still happen, but taking it out of the pool.
Yeah.
So, part of the whole genesis of ADS was try to rationalize IT across state government, right? And slowly over the years, that's been happening. And so my concern is if your ADS will lose visibility and strategic management of projects as they get budgeted out to the various agencies, instead of being looked at holistically from the ADS point of view to understand clearly and in a timely manner what's going on across IT and state government. So they lose strategic visibility and potentially cost control and understanding of what's going on. And then there's also a reporting issue. We worked closely with them last session on developing a good reporting mechanism. If they're not getting all that stuff from the various agencies, then they can't see it, we can't see it in a timely manner, and then we can't do our oversight function. So can you speak to those various issues?
Happy to. The way it works now is when a project is needed, departments fill out what we call an IT ABC form. I mean, have you seen those?
Yes.
And ADS reviews those. I believe, by the way, they're changing those now. But they're just updating, But so departments fill that out, ADS discusses it, talks to them about what they need, maybe shaves this, adds that. I mean, they put their expertise to work, because most departments know what they want, but they don't know much about getting there. So once the IT ABC form is filled out and agreed and all the signatures are on there, ADS goes out and finds vendors, asks for bids, decides on, a bid, buys or, reserves the product, and works to get it implemented. And all of that won't change a bit. Nothing. When it comes time to pay the vendor, maybe the vendors are paid quarterly, whatever. ADS pays the vendor. Then they send a bill to the sponsoring agency or department. And that agency or department, with their spending authority, pays ADS. The big change, the only change, is instead of ADS paying the vendor, they're still going to contact the department and they're going to say, this vendor has provided these services, everything's right, pay them. And the agency department will pay them. That's the only change. We're not taking away oversight. We're not, abolishing the need for IT-ABC or whatever else that succeeds that. We're not asking them to send the contracts to the sponsoring agency. We don't want to change any of that. All that we're asking is, instead of paying the bill, contact the sponsoring agency, ask them to pay the bill. That's all. And I think ADS is worried without that spending authority, they won't be able to track the spending. And, I'm here to say we will make sure that's not the case. You have my word that we will make sure that's not the case. We will work with these folks. We're in this together. We're going to work to make sure that they have the information at their fingertips and they'll be able to track the data that you need.
So it's Southworth and Sedalia, I think.
So the line item that shows the 5 million with the savings of 45 million, I believe it was, you're basically just transferring the spending authority from ADS to each individual department or agency that's going to be doing it.
Right. They already had the spending authority. This was duplicate spending authority. Remember, when ADS pays the bill, they need spending authority to do that. When they bill my department for a project they did for me, I need spending authority to pay ADS. So, that already existed. All that we're doing is we're removing it from ADS. We're leaving it in the department that has it. So instead of duplicate spending authority, go with one spending authority. And the $5 million is an acknowledgement that some things that would be ridiculous. Like if I had, every time I wanted to buy a laptop or upgrade a docking station, remember, I had to, go out and do that myself and figure out what to get. So that would be silly. So ADS is still going to do that statewide. They've done that for a while. They know what they're doing. But other projects, IT projects, the spending authority will with the agency.
Getting rid of redundancy.
That's right. Thank you.
So, so why not remove spending authority from the agency?
Because that would still leave a fairly large pool of assets that would blend into the other pools of assets and make it more difficult to compartmentalize the streams of money going in and out of ADS.
I'm gonna need that again. Not sure.
The swimming
Really.
pool.
Yeah, so
That's
right.
That would enlarge that pool to a size that we think is not necessary and make it more difficult to track the movement of money into and out of it. So why not make the pool smaller and isolate the streams? That's, I think, really all we're saying.
I'm curious how the BAA would be different in the future. Like we saw the effective chargebacks in the last year.
Yeah.
I don't remember what I said this year, but because of these changes, would it be more localized to the agency level? We would see where there may have been more spending than anticipated for a department or an agency on a project.
Yeah, the BAA last year was substantially because service level agreements, the SLA bills, and those are charges for products that are used by the agencies were higher than the initial estimates. So at the beginning of the year, ADS estimates what departments will need for various software and services that they will be billed for. You know, it's in a sense, it's almost a fool's errand. It's very hard to make those estimates, and usually they're in the ballpark. Last year, it came out, and that could be for any number of reasons. That could be because departments use more than they originally thought they would. It could be because the price of some of these services have gone up. I mean, there's a number of reasons for that. But at the end of when the bills arrived, they were quite a bit higher than what departments had anticipated. And so they didn't have budgets for it. So in BAA, that's why that was.
I have a question I don't want to forget, and then I know these guys have questions, and I'm sorry we're running late. I should have allowed more time. So across all of the different funds that are being, broken out into new funds and stuff, do you know whether apples to oranges last year to this year spending on this overall across all funds is up or down, or like what's the bottom line? I'm getting a handle on how we're moving this to there and this to there, but across everything is how much is spending up for all this stuff? Do you know?
I do.
Oh.
That I can, I'm kind of weak when it comes to the workings of ADS, but when it comes to the budgeting, that's part of my job. So in the general fund overview that we presented to the House Appropriations Committee, we made really, there are 3 different points that we made in the overview. The first is, as you'll recall, what's new this year in their budget is this direct general fund appropriation. That's brand new. They used to get a very small amount of general fund, call it $230,000, which was a very specific GIS project that they every year do. But they never, that was insignificant. This year, they're getting another $9 million on top of that. So that is an up of $9 million in general fund. In addition, the core enterprise services, remember last year I told you that this allocation was $13.3 million. And this year, the total is going to be $45 million. Part of that 45 is direct general fund, but the other part is 35.7 million. So 13.3 is going to 35.7. Now that's not all general fund, but the general fund component of that will be up about $10 million. So you have a $9 million increase in direct general fund appropriation. You have about a $10 million increase in the allocation, the general fund component in the allocation. But you also have about a $6 million decrease in the SLA. Remember, some of those SLA services are being poured into the core, they're being subsumed by the core enterprise. Remember, I used the example of Microsoft software. So the net of it is about a $14 million general fund increase. And, that we spoke to the appropriations committees about, we explained that part of that is putting what are costs that were not being recovered into the budget and, essentially being transparent about it and saying, look, these are costs that are being performed, but they're not being recovered and they're leading to a deficit in the internal service fund. So, we're just coming around and saying, look, that this we need to make sure we incorporate. So that's probably the lion's share of it.
Okay.
So what you just said was $9 million in, that was
Gia.
That was pretty
general fund, I'm talking about, $9 million in the core enterprise services that you mentioned before. And yeah, then you also said CIT is going to result in a $10 million increase
general
to
fund.
the general fund.
Yeah.
So that's 19, right?
That's correct.
Okay, I thought you said 14.
But keep in mind, there's going to be an offset down in what was the service level agreement that's currently called enterprise offerings. So there's going to be a net down for the service level agreement because some of those billings are going to be now included in the core enterprise services. And instead of being billed separately to each department, they're going to be socialized and part of the core. It's what everyone receives.
Too much razzle dazzle for me, but anyway, another question I have is about the $5 million allocated to the customized services fund. And the functions listed under that ADS will be handling are negotiating with the vendors, contracting with the vendors, providing oversight, and determining the payment. It sounds like could easily take more than $5 million worth of time for ADS just to do those things. Is that what's conceived of as being paid for by that $5 million?
The $5 million is, that would help pay for their services, but predominantly that's hardware and software. Predominantly.
But all of those functions, managing contracts, managing vendors, soliciting bids, that whole process is pretty time intensive.
That will be part of their core enterprise services function.
For core enterprise services.
I mean, that's part of what they do, that they deliver that statewide.
Did you?
Okay, but I have one more question. All right, I'm not sure that I get that, but my last question. Go ahead.
Part of the core enterprise services is what's called EPMO, Enterprise Project Management. I mean, they're helping to manage projects on a statewide basis. That's what they do.
Yeah, but I guess I would assume that's the kind of, I'm imagining from what you described, the core enterprise services is what everybody is sharing in.
Right.
And so in terms of services and equipment that everybody has to have, as opposed to enterprise offerings fund, and professional resourcing fund, formerly timesheet. Those are more specific to each department or agency.
The projects are, but project offices work on all those projects.
Well, let me ask another question, and that is, so having formerly served on transportation, the transportation budget was, of course, they have a lot of projects that are multi-million-dollar projects that span over years. Is there any way to relate this concept that you're talking about now with that, or with how other departments manage budgets over multiple years? I'm thinking about now with the what we used to call the bespoke projects. Now basically the projects that each department or agency might undertake that cost tens of millions of dollars and span over many years. Right.
I mean, in many ways, I mean, it's not a shovel in the ground, but it is an IT project, and many of those span 5, 6, 7, 10 years more. Hopefully, but yes, it's a similar concept in that you set aside funding for that, and then it is drawn down over a series of years.
Yeah. Is that? And I guess what I'm asking is that an analogous situation?
Yeah. I think that's fair.
So I want to do a time check because we're running way late. We have our next scheduled witness who's joining us remotely, so we want to stick to that as 3:30. And between now and then, we need to also hear from JFO. And we need to have a committee discussion and vote on H527. So
I'm sure for the record, Jim Steffi joined fiscal office.
yeah,
I'm due back in House Appropriations at 2:15, and I did want to flag also that Commissioner Gresham has covered much of what I would have hoped to cover with you all today as well.
Okay,
I didn't plan that.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So I'm happy to talk to the committee offline to figure out where follow up from JFO would be helpful. If you all need additional information from joint fiscal on what Commissioner Gresham has discussed today.
that sounds like a plan, or we could find a time to just plug in. I know you're down in Probst a lot, but.
I'm happy to.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I have several questions, if I might.
I was more worried about JFO. So, and it was good reason, as it turns out, because we've now blown through your time here. So I apologize for that. So we will get you, we'll either circle back with specific questions or get you on the agenda. Our budget letter isn't due until a week from Friday. I'm just trying to make sure that we allowed plenty of time to talk about the ADS budget because, as you can tell, we have a lot of questions. So apologies. And Commissioner, you don't have to go, do you?
I'm yours until the end of time.
Okay,
Careful.
so, all right, so where were we? Yeah,
Okay, so let's just see if I have some things here. So, the core enterprise services are the allocations, previous allocations, and ADS was providing more services than they had spending authority for.
That's correct.
And so now we are not pulling back those services. We are adding a general fund appropriation to ensure.
For a lot of, I mean, it's not one to one, but
Yeah.
yes, for a lot of that, we are adding general fund.
Okay,
That's correct.
so generally, that's what we're doing there.
That's correct.
The professional resourcing is the old timesheet.
That's correct.
Enterprise offerings is data storage-ish.
Yeah, that's the old SLA, but yes, it's predominantly data hosting.
Oh.
A couple of mainframes thrown in there, but.
Right. And the customized services fund are the IT projects themselves. Okay, and so I think let's go. And you have said that you can get us some apples to apples comparisons from last year to this year on those line items. I think I just heard you talk about the project offices, that these costs are now going to live with the project offices.
No, the costs of these projects will be in the agencies and departments. They will have the spending authority. But what I mentioned is, when the question was, well, ADS entails some cost to helping, I mentioned that they have a project office that is intended to do just that. And that's part of their core enterprise services, what they call, I believe, ETMO essentials. Interestingly enough, that will be purely general funded. That's part of the general.
Okay, and so these IT projects, which we have wanted, well, we know it's our job to provide oversight of these IT projects. To the extent that we're able to, which would include, making sure we understand their time, what the budgets are, et cetera. If they're moving into the individual agencies and departments, that feels like that's going to be challenging. Like who's actually overseeing timeliness and spending and all of that if these decisions are moving back into the agencies?
ADS.
Okay, I have another question, Madam Chair. So, but
is it on the same topic?
it's not.
Okay,
I've
We
got
can
my
come
finger
back.
on. I've got my finger on it. Go ahead.
okay, because, you sure?
Yeah.
Okay, because I wanted to ask about this too, and I think the reason you're seeing us have so many questions about this is the amount of work that we did last year to try to increase the legislature and just regular Vermonters' ability to track spending, to see when projects were on time and on budget. And so we took a ton of testimony on the ADS annual report, and we focused quite a lot on their EPMO dashboard, and we asked them to improve it. And it's become a more useful tool. It's a great tool. It's easy to see at a glance, all the big ticket IT projects that are under EPMO management, and, you know, how the costs are running and whether they're tracking on time. And so I think that our concern was that when we first heard about these changes this year from ADS, Secretary Riley Hughes had said that their concern is that they won't have visibility, they won't be able to see the spending. It's not going to be timely report back of data. They've been updating the EPMO dashboard weekly, I think. And so I think that's what Rep. Sebelius was talking about. That's what, we spent so much time last year trying to make progress on. And so I'm curious about how all this spending is coded, right? Like, is there across all these state departments and agencies, is it going to be a laborious, time-intensive project for ADS to request the info and the info to come back? Or is it going to be like a query button that you press on? And I know you said we'll work together, but I think that's why we're so curious about this, is because of the progress that we made, working collaboratively with the ABS last year.
So, Madam Chair, I can tell you that that's why we have chart fields. So,
Chart accounts.
yeah. This will be trackable. And whether we haven't yet worked out how we'll incorporate this information into something that will be easily retrievable, not just by us, but by ADS, or frankly, anyone else who wants to see it. But that's what we'll do with chart fields within our vision system. We'll make sure that we have these projects correctly accounted for and coded so that they're easily retrievable by whomever. And that, I think, will require some work, both on their part and our part, to make sure that a query, if you query within Vision, our statewide accounting system, just for argument's sake, IT project, you should be able to bring them all up. Now, that sounds very simplistic, but once you decide what all the projects are and make sure they're set up correctly with the correct chart fields, you should be able to do that. Like I said, this is something that we are working on. But the reason I can say that is because actually yesterday we had a reasonably long conversation on precisely this topic with our financial operations guys. So we can get that. But there should be no reason that the tracking in terms of spending and the like can't be tracked just as it is now.
So, sorry, what is the benefit of doing this?
What's doing?
Of switching this? So it seems, yeah, what is the benefit of doing this? Better tracking with the pool?
Yeah, again, we did this for two reasons. One, so we could create a core enterprise services structure that would incorporate the full suite of what ADS is doing, as opposed to what was before. And two, we could, take a serious look at why the CIT fund, which is what funds ADS, has grown its deficit. And so this allows us more visibility with a smaller pool and isolated sources of spending authority that we can track much easier.
So I think I'm starting to kind of understand what my problem is here, which is the IT projects. So I hear what you're saying about getting a handle on that pool, shrinking the size of that pool, being able to see more clearly what's coming in and out of it. So the IT projects itself is what this is the dashboard that we're talking about, like oversight of this, as opposed to ADS oversight. And right now, what we're looking at is $5 million. I think, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I heard you say before that there's a lot more IT spending than that going on this year.
Mm-hmm.
So, as the IT oversight committee, how do we know that?
You would read the same reports that you get on a regular basis on your dashboard. I don't know how you track the status of IT projects, but that wouldn't change.
So we have ADS come in.
I mean, the
walk them
ADS
through
budget, you know,
the
if
project.
the scope were the same size, if customized services fund were, you know, 47, $48 million, you wouldn't know anymore.
Can you give me an example of an IT project, just one that is going on that is not part of that five?
Virtually all the IT projects.
Can you give me just one example?
I think I mentioned before, the Medicaid data warehouse.
Okay, so the Medicaid data warehouse. So how would we do our job to know if that project was on time and on budget and where it was, both this committee and JITALK? Would we have to go through each and every one of the agency's departments?
No, you just, I mean, it would show up on the dashboard. I mean, how do you do it now?
We look on the
ADS comes
dashboard.
in,
They could still,
We look on the dashboard.
but they could still come in. I mean, they're still overseeing this project. Just instead of paying the vendor, they're asking, in this case, human services to pay the vendor, but they're still overseeing the project. You hold a contract. They're, you know, telling AHS when to pay.
they're telling AHS when to pay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
and who makes the budgeting decision? Who makes the budgeting decision? And then you just said that ADS makes the spending decision, but they tell
That's right.
AHS to, but who makes the budgeting decision?
the agencies and departments make the budgeting decisions based on what they can afford. They come to me and say, you know, we've got to replace our, you know, XYZ thing. It's going to cost $20 million. Do I have that? Can I afford that? And, you know, we look at what's available. So the agencies and departments make the budget.
Okay, so when we think about IT like IT infrastructure investments, modernization, function across the enterprise, those decisions are now going to be budgeted at the individual agencies.
That's right. They always were.
But
They-
yeah,
There's just no duplicate spending authority.
I feel like if I'm understanding this, maybe I'm boiling this down way too simply. But you said something earlier that was a bolt of insight for me. So I'm gonna run it by you and then you'll probably say, no, you got that all wrong, and I'll be back to square one.
I hope you got it right.
But what I heard you say is that the agency and ADS still work together to fill out the ABC form, which is like the project name. They talk about what they need. They figure out what it's going to cost. ADS goes out and buys the product or negotiates the contract. Or, you know, works with the agency on the rollout. That is all the same. And that seems to me like the core of the work. And what is changing is that instead of ADS then paying the vendor and saying, okay, we're done now, pay me back. Instead, ADS will say, oh, we're done now, go pay the bill. So I'm not seeing,
That's the only change, Madam Chair.
okay, so
It's the only change.
I am not seeing a big, huge difference here. I think my concern anyway was, what about our dashboard? And I don't mean to minimize that, because the dashboard's actually, it's important. And by that, what I mean is, how do we make sure that ADS can get the info it needs, and it's not going to be some, you know, big protracted thing with all these broken data fields and stuff. And it sounds like you understand that that's an important function that needs to be retained, and you're working with ADS on that.
Madam Chair, we are working with them diligently. I mean, we understand what this committee needs. You know, I get it. And we've committed to providing that.
I don't know if I summarized properly. I like it when I get it, when I can do that sometimes.
So
Suffer, and
it'd be
then-
fair to say that the Etmo dashboard is still going to be there. ADS is still managing the project itself. So that dashboard will not change. They're still going to update it. They're still going to have the same information on it, correct?
I think that's what Commissioner Gresham is committing
Correct.
to say, yes, they will be able to do that.
And we are going to work with ADS so we make sure that happens. And, you know, we know our role, they know their role. We'll figure it out. Yeah, I'm just here to put your worries, your anxiety to bed. We'll get it done. You know, law says we have to, and we will. We'll figure it out.
So one of my anxieties is, maybe I don't know if it's anxiety. I feel like there's kind of a mismatch when you have one entity contracting for work and another entity paying for the work. So ADF will authorize payment by the agency or department that's getting the work done. But it's still, I guess, is there any other example of that separation of authority in state government? And is that something that we do? Where one entity is contracting.
I don't, I mean, I have to think about, how we do that. I don't know.
Do you understand what I'm thinking? It just seems like a conceptual mismatch, and so I don't know that it's an impossible thing. It just.
Do you think the vendors, I mean, I ask you this question, do you think the vendors know who's paying?
Well, I think that if I were a vendor, I sure would spend anything, and I would be seeking to satisfy their concerns and their needs, right?
Possibly.
And if there was ever any divergence between what the contract said and what the people who are paying me want, then I would try to satisfy, I guess. I mean, I get, this is my discomfort. It seems like I would be trying to satisfy the people who are paying me.
Which would be the state of Vermont. The state of Vermont is paying you. I don't think they make the distinction. I may be wrong. I'm not a vendor.
Yeah.
But I'd be very surprised if they make the distinction, whether it's the state of Vermont Agency of Digital Services, state of Vermont Department of Public Safety. I may be wrong.
Yeah.
But,
I get, well, so
You could also turn that around though, and I mean, it could be equally strange to have ADS, authorizing payment for a bill or to a vendor for a project that, an agency or department it's their work. I mean, it's their thing, right? So I don't know.
or the agency or department might say, well, wait a minute, that's not what we wanted, or something like that.
Are we going backwards, like to how we used to do this? Like with DII?
I don't know how DII did it.
Me either. But it's more centered in the departments and agencies.
Okay, do folks have more questions for Commissioner Gresham?
I mean, I could ask questions all afternoon.
Within the time we have available, do folks have more questions for Commissioner Gresham?
So are we getting follow-up on this?
I think that Commissioner Gresham said he would provide some apples to apples type follow-up.
Yes.
And we could have JFO come in. Yeah.
Yeah, and then
I just have a quick question that I think might clarify things for the record. I'm Lisa Gobbin with the IT consultant for JFO. For the projects that are done, and probably the one that you're familiar with is the ERP project, the project management standards actually have sign off on deliverables that are appropriate for the business leads, and then sign off from the technical side that are appropriate for the technical side. So there is that cross check and sign off from the business and the technology that's built within the project management methodology. And so that's important. So it's not like, just like ADS doesn't go and sign off on business requirements for any project. They have the business lead confirm it through testing. Yes, this meets the deliverable for the contract. We'll pay this. So that sort of, cross-checking is built into the project management methodology. And it seems like that's what wasn't being connected necessarily.
Thank you for making that clear. I could have done a better job.
No, you were good.
So we shouldn't anticipate any more needs for project management, like more embedded staff, because it's already practice. So correct, you just described.
I did check in with the EPMO recently. I CC John on this question where I asked about the oversight of sign off on deliverables to make sure it was the same for projects directly managed by the EPMO, managed by contracted EPMO staff, for projects that were actually being paid for by the agency, the formerly bespoke project. And she set the standards with the state.
Thank you for your.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Commissioner, for being here. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Actually, this was a little bit fun.
Yeah, welcome to our committee. I think we should take just a 5-minute break so we can go offline and we'll be back. Discuss and vote on 527.